Welcome to episode 16 of Major Revisions. I'm John Walter at the University of Kansas, and with me as always is Jeff Atkins of Virginia Commonwealth University. How's it going, Jeff?
It's going well.
Excellent. And also joining me, as always, is Grace Wilkinson from Iowa State University. How you doing, Grace?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks, John. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. I don't think the intro person always gets asked how they're doing, but I'm real good.
Good. I'm glad. and I think as we were discussing earlier, tonight, we're all having a better week than United Airlines.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
We haven't killed any rabbits today. So, yeah. There's some perspective for you.
What do you mean they killed the rabbit?
One of those giant continental rabbits was found dead in the cargo hold of one of their flights yesterday,
yeah.
I think. And it's, of course, getting press given their other negative press. And so just all in all, exactly. United Airlines is going to look back on April 2017, I think, as a turning point in their PR program.
This makes me feel better about my life.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, don't ask why it's sinking that low. That, you know, the fact that I haven't killed any small mammals or beaten a man in the last 7 days makes me feel good about myself. But just let it be known that it does.
Good.
No, I have been. It's been 10 days of like pouring rain and cold weather, like unseasonably cold weather here. So like today was just 80 degrees and bright sun. So today was a good day.
Sounds like
but,
it.
You know, I understand your trials and tribulations there.
Yeah, it was kind of cold and overcast here, so you might be in for more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying.
Woo-hoo. We have snow in the forecast for Monday.
Ooh.
So let's just talk about that. We have snow in the forecast for May.
I only have one more week of teaching, which is exciting, but kind of sad. My class has been great. And,
awesome.
I wish I could share the final projects with you guys, but they wanted to do some interviews with other students for part of the project, and because we didn't get some IRB stuff, I can't make it public. But I'll give you a summary of the findings next episode we record, because some quite good stuff. It's the Science and Society class. We almost had one group talked into doing their final project as a 1920s era silent film, talking about genetic manipulation of like designer babies.
Whoa.
Yeah, they balked at the last minute and they ended up doing a Snapchat story. So they're teaching me how to use Snapchat. I think that's the dividing line between generations, is how Snapchat works, because I clearly don't totally understand how Snapchat works. And I'm not that old yet, but whatever. So, check in. Who made it to a science march?
Woot woot, Des Moines. Yes. How about you guys?
How was it?
It was fantastic. We had, I think the final count was over 3,000, which is, we felt really great for Des Moines.
Nice.
Yeah. One of my colleagues in the department was the first speaker at our march, and she gave an amazing talk about that she's often been told for the different things that she does, both her hobbies and science, you don't look like a hunter, you don't look like a mathematician, you don't look like a scientist. And just talking about how scientists are everyone, and we are all different sorts of people, and also anyone can be a scientist. It was really inspirational. It was by far the best talk that happened at our science march. Unfortunately, our keynote was really a bummer. It was the Farm Babe, who, if you don't know who the Farm Babe is, you should go look into her. But
adding that to links to the show notes.
Yes. So how about you guys?
So
I did not make it as one, but go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was gonna own up to also not making one, and that's not, you know, a statement about what I think the value of the March for Science is. It's more of a statement of how crazy my life is right now. And so as sort of a compromise, my fiance and I went to a local Earth Day event that was in town in Lawrence, and had a nice time, and it was good to get out in the community, and it was a really nice day. So we enjoyed ourselves for a couple hours, and then went back to packing.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't make it to one either. It was just a miserable day, and we went to a friend of my son's violin recital, and then we also had family coming in that day. And so, try as I might, I never made it over there. There was one held in Charlottesville at X Park, and I believe maybe something happened to the one in Richmond, because some of the people I know from Richmond actually came over to Charlottesville for the march here. So I'm not really sure. But then we went out and did some Earth Day stuff as well, and it was fun. There was an eco fair. Talked to some of the pipeline people. If you guys don't know listening, there's a controversy about pipelines running through the Blue Ridge Mountains in southwestern Virginia. It's quite controversial. Excellent. Did you have a favorite sign that you saw, Grace?
Oh, wow. There were so many good ones. Oh, that's hard. Somebody drew a beautiful bald eagle and wrote "Thank you, EPA." That was pretty great.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Maybe one of my favorite ones was one of the grad students in our department made a sign that said "Science is a verb."
Nice.
So I liked that. I liked that.
I saw one that had a picture of Beaker from the Muppets.
Yeah.
Yes.
It said, "The only orange Muppet I like, or the only orange Muppet I trust around science." That was pretty good.
That is a great one.
All right, so in my ever-enduring quest to try to make repeatable bits on this show while trying to avoid being a morning DJ, could we liven up the podcast if we had like sound effects, like a sound effect board, or would that be too bad? That would be bad.
No.
Only if you can do the sound effects live. That's the only.
Yeah.
That's the only thing.
So I'm going to start a game, and if this goes well, I encourage you guys to spontaneously bring this as well to a show. I call it 5 questions. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and the idea is that you just answer kind of what comes to your mind. And part of my thinking is this: we can also very quickly cover some of the apropos topics as well, and just get a feel for it.
Okay.
So my
hold
first
on.
one for you.
Hold on. Are we being asked questions one at a time, or are we both like? First, is this like a word association kind of thing that we're just like blurting out answers, or is there an order?
You can alternate answers, John. You can.
Can you feel how tense we are about this, Jeff?
Don't. You shouldn't be tense.
Okay.
My wife just got home from class, and my dog's going crazy now. My dog was in the newspaper, by the way, but that's.
I did see that. He's a local celebrity. She.
Yeah.
Sorry.
She's famous.
She's a lady puppy.
I'm sorry.
All right. Question 1. John, you have the first answer. Grace, you have the follow-up. Which poster or talk title is more played out? A. Does size matter, insert your ecological study thing here? Or B. Make blank, insert your whatever ecology relevant thing great again. John.
Oh, does size matter is definitely more played out. Funny? I'm going to go 50-50, but more played out is definitely does size matter.
Agreed.
Grace, follow up.
No, absolutely agree.
Yeah, I think the size thing was probably funny like one time, and I think it's pretty much over at this point. All right,
that
Grace.
one time was in like the 1920s.
Yes.
Grace. Who's your favorite scientist from any movie or television
Oh my god.
show, film?
Any movie or television show?
Yeah, anyone.
It's
Probably
not Sheldon Cooper.
the guy from the Ghostbusters.
Yes.
Dan Aykroyd's character.
Brilliant.
Which one?
Dan
Who?
Aykroyd's character.
Really? You going with Ray Stantz?
Hey, man, you can't judge when you're rapid firing questions at me.
No, well, I don't. I think he's the only one who was not a scientist, though.
Oh, yeah, see? Telling.
So? Someone knows who's Ghostbusters.
Follow up on that.
I don't know.
Good one, though. John.
Does Miss Frizzle
That's a
count?
good one.
Oh,
Yeah, sure.
All right, I'm going Frizzle.
what a wise
all the way.
choice.
So, mine don't matter, but Jeff Goldblum's character in The Life Aquatic.
That is
All
another
right,
excellent
I
response.
got you.
John.
Yes.
Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Bill Nye, hands down.
Grace.
Yeah, Bill Nye. I am not a Neil deGrasse Tyson fan.
Yeah, me either. Pineapple on pizza. It can be a gluten-free crust. Grace, go.
Sure.
John.
Yes.
All right. John. What is your most useless superpower? My example is this. My wife and I have recently started watching this show called Moving to the Country. It is a UK show where people in London decide to go buy houses in the country and, I guess, commute into London via the train. And my useless superpower is that I can quickly and fairly accurately estimate the cost of these houses and convert them to US dollars. Totally useless superpower.
Not
What is
useless if you get a job in the UK, for the record.
Exactly. Even if I do, I'm not buying an £800,000 house
Yeah, well,
anytime soon, probably.
who has that kind of money? Really?
Apparently, everyone who lives in London.
I don't know if I have any superpowers. I can tell you my dad's useless superpower is that he can anticipate what any commentator in professional basketball or college basketball is going to say 2 seconds rather before the commentator on television says it. It's uncanny. Like verbatim.
Well, is he just doing this to Dick Vitale? Because that's only 3 things. He's got like a 30-30
No.
30 chance.
It doesn't matter whether it's Dick Vitale or someone that actually speaks words. My dad just knows exactly what the commentators are going to say.
Grace, what is your useless superpower?
That's a good question. I guess I have a sixth sense about when things are burning in the oven. And it annoys my spouse to no end because it's always when he's cooking something.
Oh, Bob.
Well, with that, who wants to do? John, do you want to do the introduction for the actual topic today for our leading ecology podcast?
Yeah, I can do that. I love that we're the leading ecology podcast on anything.
I want to keep saying that. I don't think it's actually true, but
Right, so, we've been thinking about the March for Science, even though only 1 of 3 of us actually attended one. And just, in general, interactions with a non-scientific public, or a lay public, if you will. And one of the things that got us thinking about is what motivates us to do science. And I don't know if this makes sense to you guys, but one of the questions that I like to think about in terms of framing this is, why am I a scientist and not, something else, say an investment banker or, or anything else that you might be? Why are you a scientist?
Jeff, I think you should start.
So I have a distinct memory of when I graduated college with an English degree. I was working in a gas station. I think I probably told you guys this story before. And I was very aimless. And I kind of just wandered into the field of mental health. And, I always had a background and a lot of interest in, I was always outside, right? And then I had kids, or I had one kid. And it felt like I was living in Western North Carolina. I was around a bunch of, for lack of a better word, hippies and very natural teen folk, around the river a lot. I always felt like I wanted to do something that I felt was beneficial, but also fit my skill set, right? And so it was just like, what can I do to be productive and also kind of fill that need of, like solving problems, very analytical. How can I put that to use? And I actually intended to go to grad school to work to be like a practicing restoration ecologist, right? And the more I dug into that, the more that I got really interested in fundamental research and kind of how the world works and understanding that. And I just kind of followed that path, and it hasn't not worked out yet. And I kind of just keep going down the road of what interests me. It really suits my mindset because I'm one of these people I know the type A, type B thing's not a real thing, but I very much am like that type B personality, right? Like I can work on something for like hours and hours and hours at a time. Science kind of lends itself to that, right? And I don't know. Like I feel like it just kind of suits my kind of natural inclinations, but I also feel like it's something that you're doing. You're trying to find out how stuff works, and then I guess this alludes to kind of where this topic's also going, but also how you can make that into something that is beneficial to humanity. But that's a little high-minded. Also, it pays the bills. Grace, what do you think? Why are you a scientist?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I never... I'm a scientist now because it's what I could picture myself being, and it's what captured my attention and my fascination and what made me want to get up in the morning. But at the same time, I feel more and more comfortable every day with going, if I didn't do this, I could be doing something else, and I could have that capture my fascination and attention too. But this is what really does it for me. And so that I think I knew I was going to be a scientist the first time I collected my own data and was analyzing it, and I was just so excited about it because it was what I had done to answer and try to solve a problem or answer a question, and I was doing it, and it was novel and new, and so that was it. That was just like, yep, this is where I'm supposed to be.
So, question on that: did you have a plan A?
Sort of.
Like, what was the first thing that you were going to do?
Well, when I was 4, I told my mother I was going to be queen and I wasn't going to have a king. And so since that didn't work out, since then... no, I guess I had always thought about being something like a teacher or a naturalist, and that sort of morphed. And I think part of how that morphed was that the part of being a teacher or a naturalist that especially a naturalist that I really liked, was getting to do that science and ask questions. And so that turned into what I do now. But,
John, what about you? Did you have a plan A?
I had so many plan A's, it's hard to...
Which plan are you on now?
I think that we're probably on like 6 ways to the alphabet by now.
As it should be.
No, I'm gonna say something that's probably no, I guess I kind of, found my way into this and am, not even sure looking back how I did. Because, even, things that I started in school and, other interests that I had throughout my life were quite different from being a scientist. But I think the thing that really motivates me the most is, this combination that both you have expressed also of discovering new things and trying to make a difference, whether that's through discovery itself or through teaching and interacting with other people who might themselves go on to make important discoveries, or might just think a little bit harder about the problems that they face and the way that the things that they do in their day-to-day life affect the environment.
Sure. Jeff, what was your plan A?
Well, when I was 6, and we did this, I guess, Citizen of the Month, and they interview you and ask what you want to be when you grow up, and I said bus driver. So I guess that's A. Then after that, I was going to be a baseball player. And then after that, I was going to be a musician. Then it kind of went off the rails after that. I plugged away at that one for a while. Not real well. But, you kind of fall into it. Like, I don't know, I see like these, a lot of the students that I work with, they're so driven and they just know what they want to do, and it seems like they were just kind of bred to do this. Like, in some ways, I kind of envy them. Like, wow, that's really cool that you have like that really like mindset you want to do this. But I also kind of want to take a break sometimes, make sure with everything figured out, like 22, 23, works out. You know what you want to do.
Yeah, and I think on the other side of that, though, too, there's something to be said for if you find out that what you're doing is not what you want to do, have the bravery to stop and maybe look around and see if there's another path.
There is a great episode of the Freakonomics podcast called The Value of Quitting that talks about that. Highly recommend it.
I'm good at quitting, just for the record.
I'm aces at it.
You gotta know when there's too much sunk cost, and you have to just move on, man.
Yeah.
Move on, or change the corner and find something else. I don't know. It's hard. It can be particularly difficult if you go into grad school and you go ahead and get a PhD, though. It's a big commitment. So, I always tell people, don't do that unless you just can't see yourself not doing it. Which I think is something we talked about in here before too. Because it can be big. There's lots of different ways you can go. They're all really good.
Did you guys have doubts though while you were doing your PhDs?
Oh yeah.
Not limited to even the PhD.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely. And I think one of the best pieces of advice that I was ever given while I was going through one of my biggest doubt periods as well is another scientist, a young early career scientist, said to me, he said, I was going through the same thing about this time in my degree as well. And I went, I could stop and I could go bake bread in a bakery in New York somewhere, and I would be just as happy, and that's okay. And for me, that was revolutionary, and that's what started my whole, I think I've told you guys before, the having multiple plan Bs. Plan C, B through Z. And that's what gets me through the tough times.
I think it's important to, in a way, treat it like you do a healthy relationship. That it's a choice that you're there. Every day you actively wake up and you make a choice of this is what I want to do today, and just kind of go with it. That way you, I don't know, like to me it's like you take an active role in it, and it limits feeling trapped. I think you don't want to ever feel trapped about it. But yeah, it's the whole concept of inspiration versus motivation is different, right? And keeping the day-to-day motivation can be really difficult. It's it is a job of constant failure in a way, right? Like it's stuff that never works out perfectly. So,
yeah, it's a, it's a kind of crappy thing that it's a good day when you get, critical reviews back, but they're actually useful.
Indeed.
Yeah, I just had an experience with that, and so made me think of that.
So one of my bonus questions that I was going to ask in the 5 questions, which I actually forgot and didn't read it until just now, was imagine that you could get a perfect funding rate on every grant application you filed. The catch was you could only write your grant applications and your papers while seated in a middle school cafeteria full of middle schoolers during lunch. Would you take that deal?
Wait, so we can only write grants
And papers.
and papers.
At the lunch table with a bunch of middle schoolers during middle school.
Yeah, well, so they're doing construction directly outside my office, like 12 feet outside my door, and have been for the past 4 months, so I feel like I'm pretty primed for that at this point. I would take it.
You would take
Yep.
that? Have you had lunch with middle schoolers or elementary kids lately?
All right, true.
Actually, no. I want to trade it. I want to trade it to elementary school kids. And here's why. Because when I go, son, you have to open the milk cartons, and they just talk to you like nonstop, and the teachers totally check out, right? And they should. It's a hard job. You're just immersed and surrounded. So if you would take that deal, what's the funding rate that would be the cutoff? Would you take that deal at 80%?
Yeah.
50%?
Yep.
30%?
Now I'm starting to debate it. Guys, federal funding rates are so low.
Yeah, like seriously, 30%. You're a superstar.
Constantly covered in chocolate milk.
I mean, you do what you
Better
gotta
than
do.
mayonnaise. I'll take it.
So speaking of difficulties and trudging forth, what keeps you guys going when it gets really difficult?
Well, what sort of difficulties are you talking about?
That's a good question. John, what kind of difficulties are we talking about?
Yeah, I wrote that question, so I better have an answer,
Yeah.
right?
This is Inside Baseball. We actually make outlines. Well, Grace and John do.
Yeah, now you know which two of us are more type A, and Jeff already said he's more type B, so.
I just wander around through the woods of life.
But he tolerates us beautifully.
Yeah.
Learning to make outlines now for the first time since 7th grade. It's really helpful. I wish somebody would have made me do this.
Yeah, I make a to-do list almost every day, but that's beside the point. So the way that I phrase the question, and I'll use that as a guidepost, is what keeps us going when science is difficult. And so, I was kind of thinking about when it gets hard to do your research or you experience sort of like professional hardship in particular as it relates to so the process of collecting data, analyzing data, getting results, turning that into products, and seeking funding for your research or communicating your research, which is still a pretty expansive list of things. So,
Yeah.
by all means, take it away.
So I don't have to self-fund right now entirely. Though the last grant that I wrote was rejected without any feedback. I was a little bit frustrated by that because, well, just in general, it doesn't matter. take a minute, take a deep breath, just move on. I mean, I think big picture, it's really important to have something outside of your job in general, and this is more applicable broadly than just science, I think, but particularly to scientists, because I think scientists tend to be very focused people, right? I mean, you gotta have like a hobby or something outside of it that it's just not your whole life, and you gotta at some level treat it like a job. I understand there's a tendency to think that this is some type of religion or something akin to that to save everyone, but it's a job. You gotta have a hobby, spend time with your family or people you care about, go hiking, do yoga, something. Like if you have something else in your life, I think it helps weather those difficulties. At least kind of gives you that energy to go back and be like, all right, let's go do it again. Yeah, like right now I'm coaching Little League with a couple other people, and we have a couple kids who get really down, like when they strike out. You're like, dude, this is baseball. The best people fail 7 out of 10 times. And just try to teach them to be resilient. Just be like, look, man, next one up, just keep going. Just keep going. Don't worry about it. It's better than think of whatever the worst job you would want to do is and just remember science is better than that. At least for you.
Right. You're not United Airlines PR person.
No matter how bad it gets, you don't work for United.
Exactly.
Shout out. So, I mean, it's inherently difficult, and not to take away from other industries. There's lots of industries that are inherently difficult. Life is suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd also add on to that. I think there's a reason why we don't do science as our own personal pursuit and in a vacuum, and we work in groups and we work in collaborations and things, because often if I'm having a hard time or I've had a really bad day or just had a grant that, oh, I loved it. I was absolutely certain that was going to work out, and I feel like Charlie Brown and the football just got pulled away at the last minute, right? Going and talking with somebody else, whether it's one of my students or a colleague or, a friend that also does science, and just hearing about their science and how well it's going, or putting my mind towards helping solve their problems or something. That's what helps me get through and get perspective. I need to just gain perspective, which I think is where having something outside of having a life outside of it really helps. That's part of gaining perspective, right?
Yeah.
It's important to be well balanced.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. I think the one thing that I would add for me personally is just that, even though there are a lot of failures in science and, sort of at all levels of the scientific enterprise, in the big picture, I can't imagine anything that I'd rather be doing and that I would find more rewarding. And, kind of keeping perspective on that is important, just as, keeping the perspective of having other things of value in your life, whether, it's family or hobbies or, some combination thereof, is also really important to keeping perspective. Yeah, it's just this, this issue of balance where, no, it's not, the be-all, end-all of your life, but it's also, in the big picture, a really valuable and exciting thing in your life at the same time.
Yeah. So,
I know that I make a rather, I think, depressing motivational speaker, because I think I personally have this general kind of theory of life that I refer to as benevolent nihilism, where if I talk about it too much, I tend to depress myself. But the general idea, I think, is that it doesn't really matter. See, might as well be good. Don't worry about it.
I have a similar outlook on things to that, and yeah, it works for me. I don't know if it works for other people, but it works for me.
I don't think it keeps anyone going. Yeah, sometimes it helps to have the to-do list just to kind of make it through
It
the day.
does. Hey, you know something I also realized kind of recently along these lines is, particularly in academia, but in science in general, there's a lot of focus on success metrics. And so we don't talk a lot about failure. And so I recently had a grant that I was really excited about, and it ended up getting rejected. It got good reviews, but it got rejected. I was really bummed about that, and so I was kind of having a hard time dealing with it. And so when I have a hard time dealing with anything, I Google it, and yeah, that's just what I do. It's part of my process. So I Googled how to deal with grant rejection, and came across this actually really interesting blog post. But one of the things at the top that really stuck and resonated with me was it was a junior faculty talking about how he had a grant rejected and he was feeling down about it, and he went to a senior faculty member who he saw as, and the field saw as, super successful, and this person was just massively successful and widely respected in their field, and he was saying like, oh, I'm so sad, my global rejection rate, if I think about papers and grants and everything, is hovering at like 45 to 50% right now. And the senior researcher's response was, wow, that's really good. I think mine's about 30%. And we just don't talk about failure, or that people's rejection rates. We only focus on success. So for every grant that you hear that's funded, there's so many that weren't. For every paper you hear that was published, there were so many rejections,
It sounds like it's similar to that phenomena where, like Facebook or social media, generally people tend to post like the highlights of their life, right?
Yeah.
And so you only see that, and you think like, wow, Joe or whatever, or Cindy looks amazing. You post all the mundane shit that they do, right? Like if you were forced to post like an Instagram post every 6 minutes of your life, 98% of it would be miserable and terrible, right?
Exactly.
But that's really cool. I like that kind of approach. It's kind of like that whole idea of the negative CV, right? Like you just list all the stuff that you.
Oh yeah, I haven't heard of that before.
Yeah, the idea is that you make a CV, you would list, where you got rejected from grad school, all the grants that you had rejected that you applied to, or the jobs you applied to that you didn't get, or all that stuff, and just keep a running track of that. So I've kind of started that, but haven't really started it that well. But there's some fairly prominent scientists out there, I think, who have some. It's really interesting to look like these like really prominent people who are really well respected and do great stuff. And I'm like, wow, that's really kind of interesting to see. All that stuff. Like, oh, they didn't do this, they didn't do that.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's also part of that perspective gaining, like we were talking about. There's multiple ways to get this perspective.
So why is this unique to science? Like I feel like we do a lot more navel gazing than a lot of other professions per se. Why is that?
I mean, I think it's partly the people that are drawn to science and to academia in general. I mean, I think that there are just a lot of folks that are relatively introspective and interested in process, and so it's maybe a bit of a natural outcome of that.
Yeah. We like to study things and ask questions, so maybe one of the natural things is to ask questions and study ourselves.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's it.
I mean, I wonder if it's like, if you sell cars, you're good at selling cars if you sell a lot of cars, right? Like that's fairly easily measured. I guess with science, if you write a lot of papers, when you sell a car, you just talk to people, you try to sell the cars, and like you have like these weird, like we're constantly judged, I feel, by like other people in ways that are not necessarily comparable to other fields. Like peer review is weird in a way, right? It's just weird. We have a performance aspect of our work, right? You have to go out and give presentations and posters. You also have to be really good at teaching. Well, I guess you don't have to be, but
Curiosity driven versus use inspired.
Yeah. Anyway, maybe a conversation for a later point. But my idea is that the navel gazing is because our profession is fairly uniquely weird in how we do things. But it's also like tenure. Tenure is weird. You don't get that. Anyway, just thoughts.
No, that's a good point. I think it'd be very interesting. I'm going to try to do some looking around or some research and see if... Let's maybe try to find a talk or a reading for next time on this topic. To see how weird science is as a profession in its evaluation of itself as a profession.
Is it weird? I think it's weird. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, my sense is that it is as well. But that's always hard to say when you're in the middle of it. I don't know.
I guess my wife, she's not a scientist. Your husband's a scientist. John Blair's got a graduate degree in science, so she's not really art.
Yeah.
That's my wife.
And that just illustrated the
She's
somewhat
even a
cult
person.
portion of the science profession.
Yeah. Well, okay, so... on that though, now this is based totally on anecdotal evidence, but if you look, at least the majority of people we know, right, if their spouses are not in science, what field are they in? They're in human service fields.
Yep.
They're all in like education or social work.
Yes.
Almost all of
Yeah.
Yes.
them. Just saying. Pretty much everyone I know, my own advisor, his wife is like a clinical psychologist. My wife works tangentially related to social work. A couple of the people Grace worked with lab group, their spouses were either teachers involved in the field.
Including our
Just saying.
advisor. Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
So I'm just saying, our field is weird.
So,
So final segment.
yeah, I guess one of the other things...
A lot of editing on this one, and it's okay.
I guess one of the other things when we said that we were going to discuss inspiration or motivation or why scientists do what they do, it made me think of I guess not particularly recent, a blog post from one of our favorite ecology blogs, Dynamic Ecology, that was from back in December, about whether, and it's about fundamental versus applied, or, as we've said, my preferred way to put it, curiosity-driven versus use-inspired research, and who does it and what motivates them. So yeah, I guess, yeah, go for it.
Well, I would say also that the post asked whether fundamental research or curiosity-driven research in our more preferred parlance is a young ecologist's game, and went on to give some examples of ecologists, well-known ecologists who had become notable for some more fundamental advances in the field, and then later in their career began to focus increasingly on more use-inspired research focused more explicitly on conservation or human impacts and interactions with the environment and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So what was your initial feeling, though, when you read this the first time?
Well, for being honest, I almost threw my phone against the wall. But I
who is responsible for a majority of our readers, our viewer,
Yes.
For his lovely post talking about us. So we appreciate that.
no, absolutely. And
Continue.
I think in general, sometimes I think that just like we do on this podcast, we say things to sometimes be provocative and see what others think. And so perhaps that's what this was as well. But I guess for two reasons I had some issues. And I guess the main fundamental thing is it very much felt like it was a value judgment that fundamental research was somehow better and applied research was perhaps easier. And that comes from this particular quote, which I'm going to read. It says, "Here's my pet hypothesis. As you progress in your career as a fundamental researcher, it becomes harder to carve out large blocks of time to read and think, and so harder to stay fresh and come up with new fundamental ideas that you and your colleagues are excited about pursuing. And so applied work starts to seem more attractive." And perhaps that's how Dr. Fox feels, but that's just false, and that's stupid. Yeah?
Personally, as someone who has ageist tendencies towards old people, I kind of chuckled about that. It's kind of my initial thought of reading it, like, yeah, you get them. But I see your point.
I guess my point is that I don't think that there is nothing fundamentally better or more inherently pure or scientific or whatever about curiosity-driven versus use-inspired research. And what drives a person to ask questions of one ilk or the other has nothing to do with how good of a scientist they are or the amount of time they spend thinking about their science. I would argue that people who do applied research spend just as much time thinking about their science. But what motivates them to ask those questions might be different. And so, yes, that's the part that made me want to throw my phone against the wall. That is just false.
I totally agree with that. Totally.
So a question that I want to raise, though, is, I mean, with admittedly limited anecdotal evidence, there is an observation that there are a number of well-known ecologists who, became well-known for, sort of quote-unquote fundamental discoveries and have since, shifted towards focusing on applications of those ideas. I want to acknowledge that as a possible pattern, possible empirical pattern, but posit a different hypothesis for why that is. And I think this may not be a, sort of, shift of, a pattern of individual people so much as a pattern of our field toward being more interested in the applications and implications of ecology for conservation and for human impacts on the environment and things like that. Certainly there are examples, far back in history of that being a concern of ecologists, but I do think that there may be an increased focus on that given global change writ large.
Yeah, that's definitely quite possible. That is definitely possible, and what motivates people, whether it's career stage or where they find themselves or whatnot, can definitely, I would think, have a large influence on that, or the problems that our globe is facing and how imminent they are. I'm sure that the current political state in both Europe and the United States has led a lot of people to start thinking about more applied questions, perhaps as well, right? There's different things that can motivate folks. And that definitely could be a motivation.
Yeah, that's true.
I think...
I work on how to grow trees faster now is what I think is how to grow trees.
I do think on its... And the author does a really excellent job from the outset of saying that this is very anecdotal. Of course, it's based all on just a few researchers, pretty much entirely men that are brought up. I'm sorry. I really love this post. But, I think that it's hard to get at what motivates people. And that's something that we were even just talking about in this episode. There can be so many things that motivate you. And so trying to come up with a global reason without the data might be difficult at this point, but it's certainly something to look into. Maybe there is a trend, and that in itself is interesting. And so that's an interesting part of the post.
So I think the idea of there being a value judgment of an either or, is, like you said, is wrong, right?
Yeah.
Both are equally important. The one interesting thing that I think's in here that kind of alludes to is that I think it simply becomes easier as you progress in your career to be able to do certain aspects of applied research simply because this is my thinking here on this, that you just have a broader base, right? I think in there he alludes to, he talks about how they would want to basically do their stuff and they think new fundamental research is just old wine in new bottles. I don't agree with that take, but I would think that you just have a wider kind of net, right? And so it seems like it'd be easier to do that, whereas starting out in applied research may not be as easy to start out with. That said, though, I just saw in our old department today, somebody gave not their dissertation defense, but their kind of seminar talk, and she was doing a lot of fundamental hydrology work, and then part of her dissertation, though, she had worked on biofilms on Navy ships, and had used like this really hardcore, roughness parameters, friction coefficient, hardcore, basic research hydrology stuff. It's a very applied problem of how biofilms basically slow down ships, and she had basically was working at this very basic level, as far as basic research level, of working towards this application of basically helping the Navy figure out how to save upwards of $200 million a year in fuel costs because of how biofilms and this kind of biofouling slows down ships because it builds up on the bottom and it creates friction. It's a very basic thing with this hugely applied problem. This is not like a dichotomy, right?
Exactly.
These two things aren't separate.
Exactly. I think that's
Brilliant.
An excellent example of how research on this is a continuum. It's a gradient.
It's like that the stupid book that comes out, like whatever senator or congressperson it is, who makes that thing like stupid projects from the federal government spending in science, where it's like shrimp on a treadmill, blah, 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 blah. Shrimp on the treadmill. This is a bad example because I can't remember what it does now, but she wrote this piece up somewhere, I think it's in Slate, about what that actually tells you about fluid mechanics and biomechanics and fluid dynamics or whatever it is. It's a hugely applied issue. Like everything in that book, like, sure, you can simplify anything to like some stupid argument if you think about it. Like, I shoot lasers at trees. What does that have to do with anything? I mean, if you can simplify anything, you can make it sound dumb, but yeah, they're entirely linked. It's silly to split.
Absolutely. I think another sort of misconception, and you were sort of touching on this, Jeff, about, maybe do more senior or established scientists have the opportunity to participate in a more impactful way in applied research. And I think that in itself is kind of a fallacy, and it's one that I very recently myself used to believe. But if you want your impact, if you're very much focused on that impact being on a federal or a global level, then yes, maybe you do need to have that level of, and you probably do, that level of cachet, right? And it's easier as a senior researcher. But you can be doing applied work that is working in your state and in your local municipality, and you can be having that impact right away and right now. If you want to, you can reach out and be talking to people. It's not about, it's applied research, and doing applied questions doesn't mean you're answering or talking about some global question or some federal level question. And that's another thing that's talked about as well, is that, in the article again, or in the post, it was brought up that maybe senior people have more opportunities to engage in the political process, such as being invited to testify before Congress or being on a National Academy panel. Well, of course, early career researchers don't have those opportunities, but that doesn't mean they're not engaged in the political process. So again, I don't agree.
John, what do you think about all this?
lot of thoughts. One thing I definitely agree with is the idea that, this is, at a minimum, a spectrum between use-inspired and curiosity-driven, if not, something that's multidimensional. I just think about my own work where sort of some of the guiding questions for me are things like what regulates populations, and that's just a very sort of basic question pointing back to the foundations of our field. But I get funded for doing relatively more applied things. I work on forest pest outbreaks and agricultural pest outbreaks. I work on I'm starting a new project on bird conservation, and so I don't see this as a as an either or thing so much as I see this as two sides of the same coin, where you ask interesting questions and pick systems that people care about for one reason or another, and you end up killing two birds with one stone. Although I don't advocate killing birds, just for the record. Keep your cats indoors.
No, it's definitely true. Sometimes you can use it as a mechanism, right, for helping get more funding, because your research program can bridge those gaps, or maybe you're not asking questions that are directly applied science, but they're a step away versus 5 steps away. You're right. Multidimensional, multifaceted. I like that.
Yeah, and I would say that I work on some of the same conceptual problems as Jeremy Fox does, and I'm not gonna certainly claim to be any more successful than he is or was at a comparable career stage, but we work on some of the same ideas, but I think have some different approaches for how to get at those questions and how to sell our work to people.
We should probably wrap this up. Do you guys have some plugs for things? Grace, how did Get Out the Science go?
Good, and it's still ongoing. So if you are doing any Getting Out the Science activities, reaching out, talking with people about science, your science in general, whatever, make sure you toss that hashtag on there. That's hashtag GOT Science, Get Out the Science, so that we can be collecting that information.
Very cool. I'm going to put a quick plug in. Been working on starting a basically terrestrial ecology reading group. We have a Twitter handle. It's @ecologyreads. You can follow us, and if you want, you can join the private group. It runs via Slack, which has become my favorite thing in the world, and starting next week. So follow that if you want. John, do you have a free plug for anything you want to plug?
Nope.
You don't have to.
Nope.
Cool. All right. I guess that's it for episode 16 of Major Revisions. Hope to visit you again